Hey, this is Neil Schwartz, president of SBRNet and Sports Market Analytics. And this is the Sports Business Conversations podcast with ADC Partners.
Hey, this is Dave Almy of ADC Partners, and let me tell you, I've got some questions. I got lots of questions. For example, how does sports gambling impact fandom? Which sports are growing the fastest? What's happening with youth sports participation? And what's behind the explosive growth of women's sports? See, like I said, lots of questions. Fortunately, I managed to get Neil Schwartz, the president of SBRNet, to sit still for 30 minutes and provide answers to these and other burning sports business questions. Neil has been using data and analytics to inform sports business about fans, trends, and opportunities for over 30 years, so there's no one more qualified to provide insights into what's going on in this industry. So buckle up, Buttercup. Here comes my interview with Neil Schwartz, president of SBRNet.
Neil, you've been in and around this intersection between sports business, data, and analytics for much of your professional life. And as you and I were just talking about before I hit the record button,
Sure.
Sports has been behind the curve on those topics for a long time. So I'm wondering if you can just, from your perspective, someone who's been thinking about these issues for a long time,
Sure.
before we start diving into the issues of the day, can you offer a little bit of perspective on what you've seen and how sports businesses are finally really trying to catch up to the use of data and analytics in their everyday operations?
Yeah, David, you're pretty on point here with what you just said. The sports business, and I've been in it over 25 years, by the way, so
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of change
Oh,
in that time. And I've seen a business that did not rely on analytics and data for a long time now really kind of dive in. You really, though, have to parse it out into kind of two separate areas. Number one, analytics used for on-field performance and tracking, that kind of stuff. That is really, something that is going on in a big way. I mean, you're seeing more and more hockey teams, as an example, pull their goalie at 3.5 minutes now and hoping to be able to score a goal to tie a game up. You're seeing more and more decisions being made based on analytics.
Yeah.
But that's not what I do.
Right. Yeah. So the performance side, you get the coaches who are like, he's an analytics coach. He's not an analytics coach, right? So from like how gaming out situations, but that's not how you approach this.
No, I'm more on the business side. So we're focused more on revenue generation, sponsorship generation, selling more tickets, growing fans, really all of the things that go into the business side of sports. What's interesting is that what you see on the field and what you watch on TV, in a lot of ways, is kind of like an iceberg. That's really only like a third of really what goes into a sports team, sports franchise, sports league. The rest of it is under the ground. And that's, the stuff that really we provide data for, whether it's helping a team grow their fan base, whether it's helping a team grow sponsorship revenue, really data, as I like to say, is kind of like the GPS for all of that. It kind of paves the way. When you start a presentation with data, you are paving the road towards better decisions rather than based on, let's say, anecdotal or, I can't tell you how many meetings I've walked to and the CEO of a company says, my gut tells me this. And I'm like, my data tells me this. I'll be happy to put my data up against your gut any day of the week.
Well, I mean, particularly in this day and age in all of business, it's so metrics driven. And sports, like, why do you think sports followed that lead?
I don't think the average fan really thinks about what goes on in terms of the business side of the sports business. I think all they care about is what they see on TV or what they see when they go to an arena. I think, I think I read, about 90% of what we perceive comes in through our eyes.
Yeah.
So, I think when people look at statistics or, I don't think they care as much. Look, they do care a lot about, on-field statistics. I mean, they keep developing brand new KPIs for baseball. I mean, the OPS thing is a kind of a recent development when it comes to measuring the efficiency or the success of a batter in terms of his on-field, getting on base and things like that. But the average fan, I don't think, pays a whole lot of attention to, hey, why did Coca-Cola sponsor this particular team versus Pepsi?
Right.
Or why is Budweiser, involved? Although Budweiser seems to be involved in everything sports. But again, I don't think the average fan really thinks that along that way.
Yeah, and I think look, it's sports has also become an investment now. The numbers the numbers we are looking at for team franchises valuations and the media rights holding, I suppose that's part of it too, right? If you're going to be putting big B's, as in billions, behind these teams, you want them to operate. And so data and analytics has to become a competitive advantage, not just on the performance side, but on the business side as well.
Well, I mean, if you look at some of the deals that are being done right now, the NFL is allowing private equity to buy into franchises at 10%. By the way, I think this is a horrible idea. But
really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just think about Jerry Jones for a minute and the Dallas Cowboys. I'll use them as an example. Their franchise is valued at about $10 billion. But now Jerry also owns the stadium. So that, that changes the metrics a bit. But, if he's allowed to buy, somebody's allowed to buy in for 10%, like I'm no math genius, but 10% of 10 billion is $1 billion.
Let me check you. Hold on, I'm going to check you. Nope. Okay, I just did my math on my end. You are correct.
Thank you very much.
That's why you're the data and analytics guy, right?
I know I'm getting old, and I know I don't do math as well in my head as I used to. I used to be able to stand in front of a group of people, and we'd be quoting numbers, and I would be calculating, percentages in my head. People say, "How the hell do you do that?"
Yeah,
I'm like, you know what? It's just something I know how to do.
I've never been that guy.
Yeah. So, but look, if he's getting $1 billion from private equity, and he wants to use it to maybe make some enhancements to the stadium. He wants to be able to maybe use it to attract some new free agents. He wants to put some money in his pocket. So now it's 10%. That can't be too far from 20%.
Yeah, no, it's
what's going to happen when that private equity guy is sitting up in the luxury box and the Dallas Cowboys are down by 14 points against the, Philadelphia Eagles. And, all of a sudden the private equity guy calls down to Jerry or how come we're not throwing screen passes? How come we're not doing this? How come we're not doing that? And Jerry Jones will probably have a heart attack right there in the stadium, or actually his son will, because his son's really running the day-to-day operations at this point. Jerry's getting kind of old. But again, I do think the interjection of outside money is not a good thing for sports. I think it's horrible for college sports, and it's happening.
Yeah.
College sports is buying into, I guess, what's now the Big 12, and they're buying in. They're going to buy their way into the SEC. The Saudi PIF is buying its way into a number of sports. I just don't think this is a good thing for sports. I mean, it's a good thing for the owners because let's face it, they're going to put a lot of that money in their pockets.
Well, yeah, and we talked about it too, right? These franchise valuations mean that people want in. When people want in, they see nothing but growth. I was talking to a sports owner, as the previous podcast to this one, and he says, look, every sports owner knows that you don't make money while you're operating the team. You make the money when you sell the franchise for the valuation increase. And so,
when you see what some of these people have bought these franchises for and then how much they have gone ahead and sold them for, somebody told me that Jerry Jones bought the Dallas Cowboys for like some ridiculous number of like $300 million many, 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 many moons ago from Tech Shrimp. But, now the team's worth, again, $10 billion. Granted, he owns a $3 billion stadium and, and all this. And granted, the TV rights are just going out of sight and the merch rights have gone out of sight and everything has really gone up. But, spending $300 million and then being worth, $10 billion. Now that math I can't calculate in my head.
Yeah.
But again, it's, I saw earlier this year also the Boston Celtics, a good example. Here's a team, amazing history, won bunches of championships. They play at they play in the arena that's owned by the city, the TD Arena, whatever the hell they call it.
TD North Bank Garden.
They do not own their own stadium, but yet they still have a franchise valuation of $6 billion. Now, I don't know what the original owners paid for the Celtics. My guess is that it was nothing like that.
Not that.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, these valuations have just gone out of sight. But again, Dave, the reason is that sports owners know, one, it may not be that way in the very beginning, but they're going to get there. It's just like real estate. Was, I guess, although real estate's kind of not that way anymore. But the other thing is, though, these owners know that sports are fun. and that companies want to get involved, not just because they feel it's going to be a great return on investment, but because they want to get in on the fun.
As an emotional component.
They want to get in on
the
luxury seats. They want to get in on the entertainment value of, taking clients to a football game and, being able and sit there and watch a game and, feed them, talk to them, engage with them, create relationships with them. In a lot of cases, you can't put a dollar value on that.
So let's talk about this. I want to make a transition because as we discussed, I want to talk about the issues of the day and what the data and analytics that you're looking at on a regular basis at SBRNet are telling you. And so I think the first stop we have to do is let's take a look at the changing nature of sports fandom, because these valuations, fans don't really care about that. It's kind of on the scene. Maybe they see something in the newspaper every once in a while, but there's a carom effect. The sports do become more expensive. It does cost more now to take a family to a game. So with that in mind, our first topic that we're going to talk about is that changing nature of sports fandom. What do you see and what is the data telling you about what's going on with attendance? How is that changing?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting because everything really changed in 2020 with the pandemic.
Sure.
We had this black swan event that nobody was prepared for. And I give a lot of these leagues and teams credit on how they've been able to kind of weather the storm. And a lot of them have. Attendance had been kind of flat coming into the pandemic. Obviously, we didn't even measure attendance in 2020 because, quite frankly, there wasn't any.
Right.
So rather than kind of muck up my data, we decided, hey, we're not going to measure attendance.
Yeah.
But the one thing that we've seen, Dave, no question about it, is since the pandemic, we have seen a kind of flattening out of attendance. Seen an increase in ticket pricing and an increase in everything. But we've also seen a big move towards streaming. And that's really been the wild card in this entire process. We're seeing, fans moving away from watching sports via traditional video. So they're moving away from cable, moving away from satellite. Obviously, over the air, they've moved away from a long time.
Yeah.
But they are moving to streaming. And believe me, there are both good sides and bad sides to that. Number one is sometimes I can't figure out where to find a game that I want to watch because it's, is it on Peacock? Is it on Paramount? Is it on, I don't know where the hell some of these games are on. Amazon. Apple TV is going to get into the, football.
Fragmentation.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of that. But the biggest thing is that, we are seeing this increase in streaming. And by the way, that feeding into a number of other fandom habits and behaviors that go along with it.
Okay.
One of the things also is that I like to talk about is, and this is kind of an interesting concept. You've got what they call fans who are actively engaged versus those who are passively engaged.
Okay. And how do you define between the two?
Yeah. And then being able to take that passive fan and make them an active fan, or, you don't want to go the other way.
No.
But like I use an example of myself, and although I know to not use myself generally as an example, because let's face it, I'm not a representative sample of anything more than my house.
Yeah. For the audience that is your house, the Schwartz household.
Yes. And for a guy that's kind of pretty much embedded with science when it comes to data, I'm going off the rails here big time. But, as I talk about this, I'm a fan of the Miami Dolphins, and I'm a long-suffering Miami Dolphins fan.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm still a long-suffering Miami Dolphins fan. But here's the question. Am I worth more to the team? I just watch from the confines of my couch. I stream. I watch, I just watch the games. I don't go to games live. I don't buy licensed merch. I don't travel to support the team. I don't do any of those things. I mean, and so... I don't even give to their charities, for God's sakes.
Right.
Am I worth more or less or the same as that fan who travels to support the team, who attends games live, who interacts or engages with teams, with the players, with the team on social media, who gambles on the Dolphins, who maybe, buys a lot of their licensed merch? No. I mean, it's kind of an easy question to answer.
But are you talking about the difference essentially between not to coin a phrase, but like an analog fan and a digital fan, with the analog fan being in present, buying the soda, like all the traditional monetary things that people think about in terms of sports, versus the streamer who has a more digital relationship with the team?
The problem is with that kind of characterization, I think, is that when you talk about digitalization, or, you're also kind of assuming that I'm, utilizing social media, I'm doing a number of other digital type activities, either while I'm watching the game but I'm not.
Yeah.
I like to look at it as engagement versus lack of engagement. And then when I come up with a better word than passive versus active, I'll let you know.
Okay.
But the point is that I think the teams can use this passive fandom, i.e. myself, as a way to try to grow their active fandom. You get me off my couch to come to one game a year.
Yeah.
Get me to buy some licensed merch. Get me to support the same, the charities that are supported by the Miami Dolphins. I'm not saying they want to encourage gambling because that's a whole other issue altogether.
Which we'll get to shortly.
Talking about. You bet. But there are a number of things that they can talk about or they can do to make me a more actively engaged fan.
So you kicked this off talking about fandom. You said that attendance is flattening, but streaming is increasing. So are those correlated?
Yes.
Okay. So as you become more attuned to streaming and consuming sports that way, your attendance to actual physical games decreases.
For the most part, most of the sports, not all, football growing, WNBA growing, Formula One growing, but a lot of the sports are playing what I'd like to call a zero-sum game. As let's say their attendance grows, their streaming goes down, or vice versa. But what we're seeing is an increase in streaming and a decrease in attendance.
All right. So Neil, you just mentioned the NFL. You mentioned Formula One. You mentioned women's sports. They're all growing fans. What other sports are you seeing that are becoming more popular with fans? It's like there's so many emerging sports coming out there too right now. So what are you seeing? What's the data telling you about where people's eyeballs are starting to gravitate towards?
So let me just tell you where this data is coming from so you'll know that I'm just not talking out of my butt. Every year we do a large study of sports fandom. I interviewed this year over 7,000 sports fans. And I'm not going to get too sciencey here, we use what they call a nationally representative panel, and we gather a nationally representative sample so that what we're doing is we are trying our best to capture the habits and behaviors of all American sports fans, or all Americans actually, ages 13 years and older.
Yeah.
So, my data reflects, a lot of what's going on. The interesting thing we see is that most of the sports, are either up a little bit, in some cases flat. The sports that are up, a good deal. Right now, women's sports are just killing it. The WNBA, if I look at their year-over-year numbers and their 3-year trends, they are just knocking it down. And, look, the NFL is growing. College football is growing. Sports that aren't growing, though, interestingly enough, the Major League Soccer has kind of stopped. It was growing for a while, and it kind of hit the wall.
Yeah, particularly with the whole Messi effect thing there for a bit.
The interesting thing is international soccer is down. However, we're going to see a lot of that change next year with the World Cup. Coming here to the United States. That's going to be that would be a big deal. And I will tell you, the last time we had a World Cup here in the United States, or even the last time the U.S. team was in the World Cup, I saw something happen that I don't generally see. One, we saw soccer participation go up, more kids playing soccer. Two, we obviously saw television ratings go way up for soccer, ESPN carrying so many games. Also, the USA being in the final 16 did not hurt. But the thing is, we also saw licensed merch sales go up. We saw soccer cleat sales go up. We saw jerseys go up. We saw everything go up.
We saw the creation of the Major League Soccer as an extension of that. So.
And Major League Soccer then, kind of went off the draft. When I use draft, I'm talking about like car racing. But they used that kind of that trend that was starting to be created, and they worked it. Now, I don't think that, necessarily it's been all that sustainable. I mean, 2 years ago, Messi came here to the United States to play for Inter Miami. Look, Inter Miami just saw a huge jump in fans. They probably gained 50% more fans when Messi joined. In fact, I interviewed someone that works for Inter Miami in their season ticket kind of customer service area. And I asked him during his interview, I said, what was it like when you walked in the office Monday morning and your owner or your general manager told me, hey, we now have Lionel Messi.
We got Messi.
Get in front of those phones because we're going to be getting swamped. And guess what? They did. And it was just good for everybody.
Do you have data that supports the why people become fans of different sports? Is this is just following the trends as they exist?
The why question, David, is the single most difficult question to answer in any type of research. I can answer who, what, when, where,
but the why,
how pretty easily. The why question usually involves a qualitative aspect.
Yeah, really qualitative. Yeah,
it does. And it can be a little difficult. Simon Sinek, who's a well-known author, business author and all that, he wrote a book. I think his first book, in fact, was called First Ask Why. And, you know, I don't say I necessarily live by that, but I think that business people should take the time after they understand the who, what, the when, the where, and the how, understand the why. Why do people do what they do?
Let's do a quick pivot from professional sports to youth sports, right?
Sure.
So we just talked about what professional sports are growing in popularity, but wonder if, like, from a participation standpoint, which youth sports are experiencing growth? And we'll get into the larger trends as far as participation goes, but I'm wondering what sports stand out to you as far as where their trajectory goes.
Look, unfortunately, we're not seeing a big gain in youth sports in this country. I mean, this country, you know, the fact is we do have an obesity crisis, and one of the aspects or one of the elements in that equation, of course, is activity. And unfortunately, in this country, basically casual activity has all but gone away. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I remember when I came home from school when I was a kid, you know, I couldn't wait to pick up, you know, my baseball glove and go across the street to the playground. Or I couldn't wait to, you know, we used to play street hockey in the street where I lived.
The organic forms of youth sports participation.
It's just not happening. And so things have really changed a lot. The other thing is that the situation with tackle football. Now, tackle football is still maintaining, you know, decent numbers at the high school level. But what's happening is we're starting to see those numbers decline below the high school level. Unfortunately, what that's going to do is create a long-term pipeline problem for tackle football. Mothers just don't want to put their kids in, you know, play tackle football right now. You know, and I think football would be hard to try to convince. I know, look, I have a daughter. She has my 2 grandchildren. The 11-year-old wants to play football. And there's no way they're going to let him play tackle football. They will probably let him play flag football. But, you know, I will tell you, it's going to take a little bit of convincing even for that.
Is flag football growing? I mean, I know it's becoming more popular, particularly for women. It's like one of the fastest growing high school sports.
Well, as you know, I don't know if you know this, flag football is going to be in the Olympics this coming up.
It is
that's going to be a big deal.
I think you're right.
I think that will be a big deal. I think that will be good for the sport in general. Look, I think USA Football, the national governing body for football, I think will leverage it well. I think the NFL is fully behind it. And when the NFL's behind it, you're talking about a lot of money. And there is a lot of money that's being put on the table to support. But, you know, a couple things are, number one, we're seeing pickleball grow in unprecedented numbers. Now, the numbers have slowed.
Anyone who lives near a park, then they hear that tick-tock going back and forth. They'll let you know that it's growing.
I live actually, excuse me, I live on a country club, and there's a bunch of pickleball courts, and we're trying to build more. And the people that live across the street from it are really just up in arms because you know, they hear that thwack, you know, at 9 o'clock at night, and that's not really what they want to hear. But
so relaxing.
But I will say, pickleball did a double. They grew by double. They doubled from 22 to 23. No, I'm sorry. They grew from 21 to 22, doubled from 22 to 23. Now it has slowed down, but it is still growing by incredible numbers. And, you know, when pickleball grows, that means the pickleball manufacturers, shoes, apparel, equipment. Because as I like to say, if people don't play, they don't need to buy. In that case, they're playing and buying.
So pickleball continues to grow, but that's probably with everybody, right? I'm assuming that's with youth. But getting back to the idea of youth sports participation, yes, football flat, right? The concussion issues, injury issues, long-term, the issues regarding brain health and things like that. You can see why people are steering away from that. Are those athletes just not playing things, or are they getting redirected into other sports? Like, are they now playing soccer instead of football? Like,
they're playing soccer a little bit. They're playing lacrosse a little bit. They're actually even playing ice hockey a little bit, which is kind of interesting.
Lacrosse, no concussions in lacrosse or ice hockey.
Well, apparently, actually, the interesting thing is, and forget about concussions for a second, but what sport is a little quiz here? What sport do you think is the source of most sports injuries?
I would say overall? It would be soccer, only because the number of people who are participating and the lack of padding. But go.
It's actually basketball.
Okay.
And it's mostly soft tissue injuries.
Ankles,
sprained ankles, jammed fingers, sprained, things like that. It's mostly soft tissue injuries. But it's interesting because, look, I think you're seeing a lot of the companies doing a better job with protective gear to support these sports. I think you're seeing, again, a lot. You know what you're seeing a lot of kids doing, though? A lot of kids, moving into sports like swimming, which is great, by the way.
Yeah.
And especially what you see is when during the Olympics, coming out of the Olympics, you always see swimming, increase in, people participating.
Yeah.
But then it kind of dives back down to, where it was. So, I mean, holding on to those fans, golf was an interesting situation. During the pandemic, we saw golf go up, fans go up, players go up, viewership went up, everything went up. Problem is, golf couldn't hold on to it.
Yeah, and you start finding alternative ways like the Top Golfs and the Putt Shacks.
Well,
and the
Top Golf
like
just
that.
got sold. I don't know if you saw that by Callaway.
I did not see that.
It's going to be an interesting situation. Private equity again.
Well, so this is what's known in the biz as a segue. So private equity is leaking into sports at all forms,
Yes.
including youth sports.
Yes.
And honest to God, I just read an article the other day about a private equity company that's buying up youth sports ice hockey rinks and are preventing parents from taking videos of their kids because they own all the internal recording of that. So they're like, it's one of these stories you kind of roll your eyes and think like that. But I guess what it means is like, look, if private equity is getting involved in these things, they are going to make a profit from it. That's private equity does.
That's their motive.
Is that one of the things like this, and that's going to lead to increased costs? Is the increase in cost another one of these things that is flattening out youth sports participation? Just people
actually not just flattening it out. It's actually driving the decline. I mean, a lot of sports now have gone to a pay for play model, and I hate to say it, there are a number, people just don't have the income or they don't have the disposable income. If it costs $200-$300 to put your kid in basketball or football or whatever it might be, you may not have that money, available, for your kid. And it's not just that money, it's a lot of other money. And one of the things also is that there's been a big movement towards elite sports.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's where I think private equity thinks they're going to be able to generate, revenue from, because you see more and more parents putting their kids in elite sports travel teams, in hope of being able to generate a college scholarship. Sad thing is the numbers are so small of an athlete getting money for college that you might be better off trying to get hit by lightning.
Well, ironically, I did the math with a buddy of mine who works for Merrill Lynch, and we looked at the costs associated with a typical youth sports trajectory versus if you just took that money that you spend in sports, put it in like an index fund, and you actually put that against college, you actually come out ahead on the index fund, and more likely to obviously to have that kind of eventual success than you would if you're doing a sports scholarship. So yeah, that downward pressure from the expectation of scholarship is increasing this cost associated with youth sports because, I've heard several people say, there's nothing a parent won't do for their kid if that kid has the dream, and sometimes that dream is also the parent's dream. I'm not denying that.
What's interesting though is I'm seeing a lot of parents put their kids in I'm seeing a lot of parents putting their kids in golf or trying to get their kids in. Why? Because golf scholarships, especially for women right now, are a little bit more plentiful. I'm seeing more and more parents trying to get their girls, especially, into softball. Yeah. Because again, these sports are growing.
Water polo.
And what's growing also is the money that's available for scholarships.
Yeah.
And, I think, look, a lot of parents, want to, obviously they want to send their kids to college. Yeah. It's not cheap. And they hopefully can get some money. The thing is, though, the chances of you getting money for getting $1 for college are like,
infinitesimal.
Less, 1/100th of 1%. It's ridiculous.
So let's take one form of gambling. And Neil, this is just another segue here. You've been really teeing these up spectacularly, my man.
Hey, what can I tell you?
Let's turn our eye towards sports gambling.
This is one of my favorite subjects.
All right, good. Sorry. Let's dive into this one because obviously now legalized sports gambling is the law of the land. Took place, I think it was 2022, when the Supreme Court struck it down.
Well, I think 21 or something like that. But,
something like that.
Right now, online gambling is operational in about 30 states out of the 50. I think in the next 3 or 4 years, we'll have probably 48 of the 50 states all have legalized online gambling. So, I think that's going to be an issue. There probably are 2 states that will never, Utah being one of them.
All right.
The biggest states, though, are still Texas and California that do not allow online sports gambling. However, recently, one of the things I do is I sell a lot of data into colleges and universities to give students a chance to, work with real data. And I recently did a presentation for a group of grad students out in California. And the presentation was around gambling. And basically the question that I asked was, or sort of a statement, then a question, was sports gambling good for fan engagement? Is it good for sport in general?
Mm-hmm.
And, and we talked about, number one, there are approximately 32 million people in this country who regularly gamble on sports.
And define regularly.
At least one. I don't even, how do I define it? It's a good question.
Is that
I'm
like
thinking
once a
maybe more, I think it's at least once a year, once a month.
Once a year. Okay. Once a year or once a month.
It's not it's you self-define in a lot of ways.
Very good.
But okay, so we're seeing, number one, you see people gambling online. You're seeing people gambling brick and mortar casinos. The local bookie is all but dead.
Yeah.
It's just all but dead.
Sorry, mob.
Yeah, well, the mob found another way to make money, as you know. I don't know if you follow along with the news, but
we'll get to that.
Well, we are going to get to that because I'm concerned about a few things.
Yeah, okay.
Number one is that about 3% of all online sports betting is done by underage people.
3%.
3%. Now you might say, "Oh, that's only 3%."
That's bigger than I would have thought.
3% of 30 million is almost a million people.
18 and under.
18 and under.
Yeesh.
So it's not even 21 and under, it's 18 and under.
Yeesh. Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that I did a presentation a couple of months ago for one of the state gambling commissions. And one of the things that we talked about was, so there's a lot of research. I am not a neurologist. I am not an epidemiologist. I'm not anything that has the word ologist at the end. But it's common knowledge that the average adult brain doesn't really form or doesn't really, become an adult brain until it's between the ages of 24 and 25.
God, I'm 57, man. I'm still open for it.
I'm a little older than that, but we'll just leave it hang there for a minute. But the thing is this, the way the gambling companies advertise, put $5 in an account, and if you win, we'll give you $300 back. Now, you're a 19-year-old college student. You see that, what are you thinking? Hey, I have $5.
Easy money.
I got my parents' debit card or my own debit card. I have a fake driver's license. I'll go ahead. I'll sign up for an online gambling account. I'll put my $5 in and hope for the best. And if I win, I'm going to get $300 back. But guess what? You can't take that $300 back. They think they're going to get free money.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no.
There is no such thing as free money. And the gambling companies know this. And what happens is they hook them in with that kind of loss leader or that offer. And then, then all of a sudden they're hooked, and all of a sudden, they're into, one of the online gambling companies for thousands of dollars, and mom or dad has to come and bail them out. That's a real problem.
So underage gambling is absolutely a problem. I'm a little surprised that it's just, well, then again, if there's anything that youth are good at is figuring out ways around barriers that are supposed to be there to be able
the system.
Yeah, beating the system. But what about it for people who are of age for legal sports gambling?
Sure.
What does it do to their level of engagement? I mean, there are. I think we all kind of laugh about it now, like the whole DraftKings and daily gambling ads during football were just like every other ad was for daily gambling. But what is it doing for fan engagement? How is it putting people and making them absorb their games and consume the games differently?
So the good news of sports gambling is this. Fans who gamble are much more engaged.
Yeah.
They go to more games live. They spend more money on licensed merch. They'll travel to support their teams. They most likely they play fantasy in a lot of ways because fantasy in a lot of ways was the gateway to sports gambling.
Mm-hmm.
So they did fantasy first and then jumped up into sports gambling. So there's no question, Dave, no question. My data supports this 100% that fans who gamble are much more engaged.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a team wants.
Yeah.
They want an engaged fan because an engaged fan spends more money. And that's what they're in business for.
And you just alluded, though, to some of the news that's been coming down of late. And I'm thinking most specifically of the cheating scandal that's been in the papers about the NBA with the Trailblazers head coach Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier, Heat player, being accused of gambling on games. So, yes, I see how an engaged fan is much more, a gambling fan is a much more engaged fan.
Yes.
But how tenuous is that relationship when you have those kinds of credibility issues? Does that present like a cliff opportunity?
You just used the key word that began with a C, and that is credibility.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, all of these various scandals are not doing sports any favors, because when sports loses its credibility, you might as well be the WWE and betting on wrestling, for God's sakes, because it's entertainment value. But, if you have to worry that, a referee has been bought by the mob, or that a player, there are now players that were pitchers that were accused of signaling pitch, what kind of pitches they're going to throw, to a particular batter. It's ridiculous. It's gotten ridiculous. And unfortunately, I don't know why anybody didn't think this was going to happen.
Seems like it's pretty normal.
Well, unfortunately, it's probably been happening under our nose a lot longer than we think. And because we didn't see it, or we didn't want to see it, we didn't really. But, recently with this NBA situation, what's unique about this is that they mentioned the mob in the indictment. They don't usually do that, unnamed gamblers or unnamed, no, they mention specific, crime families.
Yeah.
You don't see that too often.
And sports has always billed itself as unscripted drama. And like not knowing what the outcome is going to be. And I think from a gambling perspective, everybody is engaged in sports gambling because they think that they've got a equal opportunity to win because no one knows exactly what's going to happen. And so again, going back to that credibility issue, if people begin to believe that the outcome is prearranged
or fixed,
that is going to strike at, I think that's going to strike at the heart, or are people more forget? Because we've had referee gambling scandals. We've had point shaving scandals, and the sports have always continued.
We've had a lot of that over the years. But remember one thing, we didn't have that on, the internet. The internet, Dave, has changed everything.
Yeah.
Things used to move at the speed of sound. Now they're moving at the speed of light.
Yeah, quantum.
So, when they had sports gambling, it appeared maybe in the New York Times, and then it got picked up by, a lot of local newspapers. But who reads the newspapers anymore? So
what was that word you just used? Newspaper? I think I've heard of that.
The thing. Paper with print on it. But again, because of social media, and the conspiracy nuts that are out there, and, literally, if I had my way, I would basically turn the internet off, except for email, because I think email is the only really good thing that the internet is accounted for. Although I shouldn't say that, because there's usually one or two Amazon packages sitting by my door every day. My wife is addicted to Amazon. I have to say,
we're getting to that season where boxes show up, and I'm like, what? I have no idea what.
Fast and Furious.
Exactly. All right. So sports gambling, I think, certainly some red flags,
good and bad,
associated with right. It creates engagement, but clearly there is a very tenuous moment between trust. So I think that's a challenging one. So, but I want to finish on one that I think everybody's pretty excited about, which is the rise of women's sports.
Sure.
So obviously you can't you open up any sports related business publication, and a lot of it is about the rise of women's sports. We see franchise valuations starting to accelerate at very high levels. How can you, what do the data tell you? I'm interested specifically in how is a fan who classifies themselves as a woman's sports fan manifestly different from someone who I guess we would just call a quote unquote typical sports fan? Is there a delta between the two?
A little bit.
Yeah.
The typical sports fan is mostly male, about 50. Well, in our most recent study, in fact, we just did a kind of a report on this, that, typically sports fans are 55, 57% male, and the rest, of course, female. Now, we're starting to see those numbers change a little bit. We're starting to see, more female fans. Now, you said something earlier that was very important. The cost to go to a game live has gone up considerably. Well, the NBA, as an example, as well as other women's sports, are a chance for families to be able to go to a live sporting event, see professional athletes at a much lower cost. The tickets are less money. The concessions are less money. It costs less to park. They're generally playing in many cases smaller arenas where it's not as hard to get. It's not as hard, they're not going in the middle of the city, so it's not as difficult to get around. So women's sports has a lot going for it right now. And the biggest thing is that the appeal it has to families.
Yeah.
And really, I think that's one of the things. And also look, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese have done a lot for women's sports. There's no question about it. And, we're starting to see, women's professional soccer, kind of get in on the action. I know women's professional hockey would like to get in on the action. I'm not quite seeing that one catch on quite as well. But, we are seeing, and the interesting thing is that when you go to a WNBA game, I actually had this argument with a marketing director at a WNBA game. So I was at an event and I said, actually the WNBA actually has more male fans than it does female fans. And he said, that is absolutely not right. And I said, you want to bet? I said, because first of all, just
never bet a guy who's in data and analytics on a statement like that. I don't know.
This guy was not having it. Number one is that
am I right, Neil?
there are just more male fans. It's just a fact. But when you go to a game and you look in the stands, you still see more men than you do see women. And because number one is that men are latching on to gambling on women's sports. Why that is, I do not know. I don't know if there's been any sort of if there's any sort of ratio that has been done, because I don't really track that part.
Yeah.
But it's just there are more male fans in general. But the WNBA does a great job with families. They encourage families to bring their kids, come out to the game. They do a lot of deals with food, which is a big part of going to the game. And I think they have removed a lot of the barriers.
If you were looking to take your family to a professional sporting event and an NBA game and your kids are younger,
yes,
and you're looking for a great night out,
yes,
and an exciting night out, and you want to go see a sports thing, an NBA game is, I'm assuming, over $1,000 to bring a family of four.
NBA, I think NBA might be a little bit south of that much. The NFL is really
NFL far surpasses
way north of that much,
way north of that. But let's call it $800. If I'm looking to do that and my kids were really just looking for the excitement, the WNBA provides a great opportunity to be able to do that in a way that, as we talked about, with all the money pouring into sports and consumers becoming squeezed for every nickel that they got that they want to put against sports and entertainment, it's a powerful and exciting opportunity to do that.
I mean, before the advent of streaming, if you wanted to see a lot of these sports and you had, you just didn't have, the money, or you just couldn't afford it. What happens? You go sit up in the nosebleeds. And, I think a lot of people, you know what? Yep. I don't have to go sit up in the nosebleeds. I can sit right on my couch.
Right.
I can sit right on my couch and watch the game via streaming. And guess what? It's nice. It's cozy. I get all the food I want.
I know the bathroom's clean.
Bathroom's clean. Yeah. I can get to it easy.
Most of the time.
Yeah. So, the only thing is, I am a sports fan. Make no mistake about it. I am a Florida Panthers season ticket holder. I love hockey. I love the Florida Panthers. But I do see, good seats, lower bowl, and all that can get quite expensive. You're looking at anywhere from $80 to $100 a ticket. So let's just say you're taking a family of four. So there's, let's just call that $100 times 4 is $400. Costs $30 to park.
Yeah.
You go to the concession stand. Literally, I go with one of my friends. We'll get a pretzel, 2 pretzels, and 2 sodas, and it's like another $25. And I'm like, damn.
That's a damn good pretzel right there, I bet.
Better be.
It better
last a long time.
I'm with Neil Schwartz. He is the president of SBRNet and the sports marketing analytics. Neil, thanks for spending the time. I feel like this is one we should probably try to do on like a quarterly or half year check-in for checking in the latest things, see what's changing and what the data is telling us. So Neil, appreciate the time.
You're welcome. Just in case it didn't come through, I love sports. It's what motivates me every day to get out of bed. Sports are fun.
Yeah.
So if you want to learn a little bit more about what I do, head over to SBRNet.com. We've got a lot of things that are in front of our paywall. You're not going to be able to get at the data that I've been quoting, but you'll be able to get at a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Number 2 is that I am on Instagram. It's SBRNet at SBRNet Data. And then I'm also on LinkedIn at SBRNet. So, there's a lot of different ways that you can catch up with us. Feel free to reach out to me. I do answer my emails, Neil at SBRNet.com. I guess I'm a dinosaur that way.
Wow, really? No kidding.
But Dave,
I have really enjoyed it. AOL.
I know. Well, but Dave, we talked about 30 minutes or so. We're about 50 minutes deep, and there's a lot to talk. Sports
it's
are
perfect.
fun, Dave.
Yeah, they really are. And look, if you are in sports business, SBRNet in particular is a great resource to be able to check out and sort of get a good sense of data trends, things that you can use to build cases for what you're doing and support some of the other research you're doing. So,
you bet.
Neil, appreciate the time.
Dave, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on today.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Sports Business Conversations podcast.
If you enjoyed it, we always appreciate a subscribe, share, comment, or like. And if you're the social type, you can always follow us in all the usual places. Don't forget, past episodes are located at adcpartners.com/podcast. A quick shout out to Scott Holmes for composing our theme music. This podcast is a production of ADC Partners. All rights are reserved.